A young reporter asked President Trump a question no one dared on. His reply stunned the entire room. President Donald Trump stood at the podium, mid-sentence, confidently delivering his remarks, when a young reporter from a small independent news channel suddenly lifted her hand and her voice without waiting to be called on. President Trump, why should the American people believe anything you're saying today? Her question sliced through the tension like a blade made of pure courage. A wave of gasps rolled across the hall. Several journalists exchanged wide looks, others pressed their headphones tighter, eager to capture every syllable. Interrupting a president was bold enough, but interrupting him with a question that sharp, that direct, that emotionally loaded, that was almost unheard of in a room built on strict protocol and delicate balance. President Trump paused mid. His expression froze just long enough for the room to feel the weight of the moment. His hands, usually quick to gesture, tightened around the edges of the podium. You could see the flicker of surprise cross his face, quick, subtle, but unmistakable. Everyone braced themselves. Cameras zoomed in. Microphones tilted forward. Even the air seemed to hold still. This was the kind of moment that could erupt into a fiery exchange. The type of clash that would dominate headlines for days. Many in the room prepared for a familiar pattern, a sharp rebuttal, a counter-question, maybe even a dismissal. But instead, something no one predicted began to unfold. President Trump didn't fire back. He didn't move. He didn't even blink for a moment. It was as if he was processing not just the question, but the intensity behind it, the frustration, the doubt, the pressure that millions of viewers might feel. The reporter stood her ground, her voice steady despite the attention crashing down on her. She had crossed a line most journalists never dared approach, and yet, there she stood unshaken. The room was silent, waiting, watching, and with every passing second, it became clear, this wasn't going to be just another press conference. This was the beginning of a moment everyone would remember. The reporter, Emily Carter, wasn't done. She stepped forward, her posture firm, even though her voice carried a faint, tremoring edge evidence of the storm of nerves she was fighting internally. She knew the entire room was watching her, maybe even judging her. But backing down now wasn't an option. Millions of Americans feel confused, she continued, lifting her chin with new determination. They hear different stories from different sides. So my question is simple. Why should they trust you now? Her words didn't just hang in the air, they crashed into the room with the force of a challenge. No one expected her to deliver. Every camera immediately pivoted to Emily, zooming in on her face. A dozen red recording lights blinked like tiny warning signals. Every reporter paused mid-note, mid-whisper, mid-breath. The room had become a stage, and she was suddenly the center of it. And President Trump simply stared, not with anger, not with impatience, but with a long measuring silence that made the moment stretch like an elastic pulled to its limits. It was the kind of silence that made you acutely aware of every sound around you. A pen clicked somewhere on the left, a camera lens adjusted with a soft mechanical whir. Someone coughed quietly into their sleeve. Even the air conditioning, usually unnoticed, hummed loud enough to feel intrusive. This moment wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of. President Trump was known for his rapid-fire replies, his sharp counter-questions, his ability to redirect a conversation in seconds. He'd handled tough questions before plenty of times, but this one was different. This wasn't about a specific policy. It wasn't about a statistic. It wasn't tied to any single event. This was deeper. This was about trust, the most fragile, most powerful, most complicated word in politics. And trust isn't something a leader can demand. It's something people decide to give, or not give. The journalists in the room felt the weight of that realization settling like dust. Trust wasn't something you could defend with a chart, or disprove with a fact. It was emotional. And emotions are unpredictable. Emily stood firmly, her hands clasped behind her notepad. She looked nervous, yes, but also braver than most expected from a reporter her age and from a network so small. The hall felt tight, almost suffocating, as if even the walls were leaning forward to hear what would come next. A coffee cup clattered to the floor in the far corner, But no one turned to look. Everyone stayed focused on the unfolding moment. No blinking, no whispering, no escape, because everyone in that room sensed the same thing: something important was about to happen. And still, no one looked away. Then, finally, President Trump leaned forward. For several seconds, he didn't speak. He simply rested his hands on the podium and took a deep, deliberate breath. Slow.com measured. The sudden softness of the moment caught everyone off guard. It was rare to see him pause this long, and even rarer to see him do it while facing such a piercing question. When he finally spoke, his tone was unusually quiet, almost reflective, a stark contrast to the high-tension atmosphere swirling around him. "That's a fair question," he said. The room froze again. Those weren't words anyone expected. Some reporters exchanged startled glances, others unconsciously straightened in their seats. The phrase carried an unexpected weight coming from him, especially in response to such a challenging question. President Trump continued, his voice steady and controlled, but softened with something that almost resembled honesty, or at least the willingness to be understood. "People can believe me or not believe me," he said. "What I've learned is that trust isn't demanded, it's earned. And whether someone agrees with me or not, I show up. I speak directly. I answer questions. That's all I can do." A stillness settled over the hall, thicker than before. It was the kind of silence that felt intentional, meaningful. The entire room seemed to be absorbing his words, unsure whether to see them as strategy, sincerity, or something in between. He wasn't attacking, he wasn't defending, he wasn't arguing, he was acknowledging. It was a rare tone, calm, disarming, almost vulnerable. It wasn't what the reporters had braced for. No rapid-fire rebuttal, no raised voice, no confrontation. President Trump lifted his eyes and looked directly at Emily. The intensity of his gaze made her straighten instinctively. But she didn't flinch. "You don't have to trust me because I say so," he said. "You should trust what you see. What I do, judge me by results, not rumors." It was unexpectedly calm, unexpectedly sincere, and unexpectedly disarming. Even some of his critics in the room looked momentarily thrown off. A few lowered their pens, unsure how to categorize the moment. Was it a strategy, a shift, a rare moment of transparency? Whatever it was, it wasn't the fiery exchange everyone expected. It wasn't the spectacle people braced themselves for. It was something different, a moment that revealed a side of the president few had seen, and even fewer had predicted. After a long pause, Emily spoke again, this time softer, steadier, and more controlled than before. The initial surge of adrenaline that had pushed her to interrupt the briefing had settled, replaced by something clearer: purpose. "So you're saying trust should come from actions, not promises?" she asked, her voice echoing just enough to let the weight of the question fill the room. President Trump nodded once, firmly. Exactly. That single word detonated a wave of whispers across the hall. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Journalists leaned toward one another, scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Producers in the back signaled to camera crews. Commentators in livestream booths pressed their headphones tight, already preparing the angles they would debate for hours after the briefing ended. And online, where millions were watching in real-time chat feeds, erupted instantly. Some viewers typed, "Did Trump just compliment a tough question?" Others responded, "I've never seen him answer like that." And many wrote, "That reporter has guts." Emily glanced down at her notes, taking in a shaky breath. She hoped no one noticed. This wasn't even close to the response she expected. She had prepared for pushback, maybe even verbal heat, but not calm acknowledgement. Not a polite exchange. Not this strange, electric form of respect that had emerged between them. Still, she held her ground. That was her job. That was why she was here. President Trump gestured toward her with an open hand. "You did your job," he said. "You asked a hard question. People deserve honesty even if we disagree." A few reporters in the front row actually froze, mid-writing. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the tone. Simple, direct, surprisingly measured. and utterly unexpected from a moment that had begun with so much tension. And that line so unadorned, so straightforward is what truly stunned everyone. Reporters who had arrived expecting an explosive clash were suddenly witnessing something else entirely. To people standing on opposite sides of a high-stakes conversation, engaging in genuine, unfiltered dialogue. No shouting, no interruptions, no theatrics, just honesty meeting honesty. It was rare, it was powerful, and it was undeniably captivating, a moment that felt almost out of place in a world where confrontations usually overshadow conversations. For the first time all afternoon, the room felt less like a battlefield and more like a conversation that mattered. As the press conference wrapped up, the moment replayed online in thousands of clip shorts, reels, live stream rewinds, reaction videos, political breakdowns, media commentary. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Pundits analyzed it with raised eyebrows. Social media debated it with fiery passion. Supporters and critics shared the same clip for entirely different reasons, each emphasizing the parts that resonated with their own viewpoints. But despite the divide, the reaction had something in common. Everyone was talking about it. Emily Carter, once a relatively unknown reporter from a small independent channel, suddenly became an overnight symbol of fearless journalism. Her question, her poise, her willingness to challenge the president in a moment of national attention, it struck a chord with viewers. Her channel saw an explosion in subscribers, comments flooded in, interview invitations poured into her inbox. Viewers praised her for daring to ask the question many people had only shouted at their screens. Meanwhile, President Trump's unusually calm and composed response sparked a different kind of conversation. Some commentators argued it was strategic, a calculated moment of restraint meant to shift public perception. Others insisted it was sincere, a rare moment of reflection captured on camera. And many were simply stunned that such a tense question had resulted in such a measured, surprisingly respectful exchange. But regardless of the angle, one thing was undeniable: the moment was unforgettable. When Emily later reflected on the viral exchange during an interview, she spoke with the same clarity that had carried her through the press hall. "I said the question because the public deserves clarity," she said. "Not confrontation, clarity," and perhaps that was the true impact of the moment. It reminded people amid all the noise, the tension, the constant political battles that questions still matter. That answers still matter. That accountability isn't about tearing someone down, but about seeking truth. Whether you viewed President Trump's reply as surprising, strategic, or sincere, one thing stood out with absolute clarity. The world witnessed a rare moment where a tough question didn't lead to chaos, but to clarity, a reporter's courage, a leader's unexpected calm, a shared moment that shifted the energy in the room and echoed far beyond it, through newsrooms, through living rooms, through every corner of the internet. And that is why this moment stunned everyone.